On air.
Welcome to our third Predictions 2022, brought to you by Circle Strategies. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day today to hear what we have to say about what's wrong with compensation and benefits. I'm joined today by two experts in the field of both benefits and compensation. Joel Allenbaugh is the president and CEO of Health Access Solutions, and also Pascal Orliac, who's the co-founder and chief marketing officer at Care to Care International. So welcome, both of you. Appreciate you taking your time out of your day today to talk about a topic that is very, very complicated. We are talking about this topic today because we've most employers are still struggling with coming out of COVID. They're still struggling with bringing their employees back to work. They're now being hit with a very, very difficult passage through recruiting, and also a very, very difficult passage for employees leaving the organization. Uh, Very, very tight labor market, and also salary compression issues. So we thought it would be very helpful today to have a conversation about what's wrong with compensation and benefits today, and how can we possibly provide some solutions. Uh, what's it, what's very important to recognize is that when you talk about compensation, we also have to pay attention to the total compensation package, and that's including all the employee benefits that are being provided. And healthcare is the most expensive benefit that employers have to include as part of their package. So we don't see a lot of help coming to us as employers from the legislative side, specifically with healthcare reform. We also don't see a lot of help in terms of how we can handle salary issues and the tight labor market and inflation and international conflict. There's a lot of things that are causing leaders of organizations to become very concerned with this topic specifically. So, we're going to start the conversation today talking about what should we in HR and the C-suite be concerned about. One topic that we, amongst the three of us, have discussed is that there are compression issues that we should be paying attention to. And so anyone in HR and the C-suite should be concerned about pay compression. And so, Pascal, can you just share a little bit with us about why? Why should we be worried about this?
Well, we should. We definitely should be worried. Not that it's new, right? Pay compression is kind of not the last issue we have had on our HR table. It's been out there for a long time. The phenomenon of having, people seeing their pay kind of limited when they are within the organization, whereas people that are brought in to the organization tend to be on the top edge of the range every time you bring somebody new. This has been out there for at least the last 22 years I've been working in HR. And what's new is the fact that we haven't seen such a low level of talent shortage, or such a high level of talent shortage, I should say, in the last 20 years that it is now. And now, so we are hitting rocks, right? So we are at the bottom of that, and we need to realize that not doing anything in terms of salary balancing is hurting the organization. And it's basically, if we onboard people that are paid more than the people we have internally, it's a premium for getting people, or for people quitting, or for people moving from one organization to the next, right? Which is not what we want, because we also want to retain the talent we have, right? So it's kind of a conundrum. It's a strange situation where we have kind of opposite interests that are kind of going into friction, right?
Agreed. And you have had a role as a senior HR executive in a couple of different companies. And so What advice would you give to a CEO who needed to go speak to the board and say to the board, we've got to pay a lot more attention to our pay that we're providing everybody rather than focusing on what we're going to pay to bring specific talent into the organization? What specific advice would you give to a CEO if they came to you and said, "I have to go talk to my board. What should I do? What's the best way to frame the conversation?" Can you share some of your experience when you were a senior HR executive?
Sure, absolutely. I was actually an HR executive, so I was not the CEO. So the first step is having the conversation between the CEO and the HR folks, right? And probably the CFO. What we've seen, what I have actually witnessed firsthand for many, many years is that the HR person actually are not always at the strategy table. So it's a difficult step for many of them to get invited at that table. So the first step is for the CEO to kind of speak to their HR folks and making sure that they have the right data. So advice number one is probably get the data right. Every time I had success at the strategy committee or the board level, talking to individuals about people's issue and salary issue, particularly the money aspect of it, was because I was bringing data. I was either it was compensation analysis with comparatio, market research, um, trends, benchmarks with regards to competition, competing and new talent problems and recruitment and so on and so forth. Anytime it requires a lot of data. So get the data, get the information, whether it's about compensation, whether it's about salary structure internally, whether it's about benefits, and then you have the discussion about the complete compensation package, right? The total rewards package, as we call it. um, but you have to get the data straight and bring that to the board and make them in front of a choice or series of choices that they have to make, decisions that needs to be made in terms of rebalancing whatever component of the salary and benefits equation.
I agree. Data is really the most powerful tool that anyone can have when they're trying to make a change, and it allows people to make an informed decision when you have the facts right in front of you. So that's excellent. Thank you. Uh, Joel, you've had a lot of experience in helping to provide a framework for legislative changes down in Washington. So I think when we look at what's happening with healthcare today, we don't see any legislative cost controls coming down the pike to help us manage those healthcare cost increases. And so, what should we do? What should we do? How are companies going to answer the question of spending your dollars wisely that you're allocating for benefits?
Well, and I think tying, to the points that Pascal was making, it's, oftentimes from a CEO or a board perspective, you're having these conversations in the context of an organization broadly. So you've got whatever the financial pressures are, you have, other compensation needs. And I think for a lot of employers, one of the big challenges is that healthcare is a huge line item, and it's entirely unpredictable for most employers. And so how do you look long term when you're managing, an expense that you sort of can't grapple with? And I always think of it a little bit like, trying to plan, as an example, how to provide the right value proposition in your benefits when the cost side of the equation is on fire, and it always takes the oxygen out of the room. You're always dealing with those immediate cost pressures. um, just to tie back, I tend to agree that I think I think so many of us are waiting. We hear so much discussion in the public policy circle about healthcare, and we hear lots of ideas being floated. And I think, lots of people who run for office who promise to fix healthcare. And so everyone's kind of waiting for that solution. And I don't think we can afford to wait. And we need to act within the environment that we have to act within. And there have been changes. I think one of the big challenges for employers is that they're carrying healthcare cost liability on their balance sheet. And that is extremely difficult. And if you can shift that liability and get to more of a predictable, defined contribution type of an approach, which you actually can now do and stay ACA compliant as an employer because of regulatory changes in the last few years at the federal level, that might be step one for some employers. Let's just step back and put the fire out. Now we can think a little bit more strategically about how we want to deliver a good value.
And what legislative changes recently that employers could take advantage of that they may not know about already?
Yeah, one would be ICRA, which stands for Individual Coverage Health Reimbursement Arrangements, which is a big mouthful, but it's that's a regulatory change. It was a rule-based change. It was finalized in 2019. It took effect January 1, 2020. And for the first time with that regulatory change, an employer has the ability to satisfy their requirement to offer ACA compliant health insurance without necessarily being in the group benefit business. So I can get out of the insurance business largely and focus on providing a health benefit for what many employers is a very diverse set of needs from a diverse workforce.
And have you seen organizations around the country starting to take advantage of this piece of legislation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at our own organization, we've worked with employers that are using some of these strategies. And, I remember helping, in our own universe, our first employer with that type of strategy back in January of 2020 when those regulations took effect. And just within our small universe, our membership is in 29 states. And so, we're just one small player in a bigger national universe where I think a lot of people are starting to get creative, think differently, help employers just come at this problem more strategically. It's just so much is reactionary, which is not a criticism. I mean, it's everyone responding to these cost pressures, but we have to back away from these cost pressures if we're going to ever get at this more strategically.
Thank you. That's a great piece of information that people can take away from today.
Can I add something, Cliff?
Yeah, of course.
On top of that, I think there is an important part of the conversation that is to be had is the fact that with other pieces of legislation, the CAA of 2021. That is bringing transparency and the No Surprise Act on amongst other things, is adding a new amendment to the ERISA Act, which is basically what guides and regulates the retirement compensation plans. It makes the CEO, or it makes actually the management of the companies fiduciary responsibles or fiduciaries of the money that is held in the health or invested in the healthcare space, which is kind of new. It's a new approach to that problem, and that's another reason why I would ask again back to your first question, Cliff, is you cannot postpone having the conversation. You've got to have the conversation now, and not just with your HR people, but also with a select number of advisors, right? And people that you ask that are in that space, like Joel, and asking the right questions about what do we have to take care of to meet our fiduciary responsibilities. And that's a whole new level of responsibilities that you are in because of that lack of predictability, as Joel mentioned. It's a bucket, an enormous bucket of money that you have a hard time grappling with.
And a reason to add to that point, a reason to be involved at the CEO and the CFO level in these healthcare benefit decisions and discussions, because I think to have HR professionals shoulder all of that responsibility is really difficult, especially when they probably don't have control of the purse strings in the way that the CFO and the CEO might. And I think this needs to be a collaborative discussion now more than ever because of some of the very things that Pascal's referencing.
So we're saying that the CEO needs to go to the board and explain to the board that we have to look at compensation in a different way than we've been looking at it today. Rather than being reactionary, we need to be prepared and be aware of pay compression. We're also asking the CEOs of the organizations to make tough decisions about their healthcare benefits, specifically not being tied to the traditional insurance model. These are two possible solutions to help us fix what's broken in compensation and benefits today, along with utilizing some of the new legislative tools that are out there, and also to recognize that healthcare benefits also have their level of transparency. And just to be clear, when we say transparency, we're talking about compensation that is paid to the advisors of the healthcare benefit programs, being fully transparent about those. And that, I think, also uncovers some of the hidden issues contributing to healthcare cost increases and employers not having the tools available to be able to make solid decisions. So that brings us to this next question, which is what's the right compensation and benefits balance that we have to worry about as organizations, as leaders in HR and leaders of the organization when it comes to talent management?
Yeah, I can start. One thing I would point out is that, so my area of expertise is more on the health benefit side, right? So less on the broader compensation. But I think one of the things that's important to recognize is that your workforce is going to have a very different value proposition for the health benefits that you're providing. Meaning, if I've got 100 employees or 50 employees or whatever that number is, a huge percentage of those employees barely, if at all, use whatever health benefit I'm providing to them. Healthcare needs they're episodic and they change, throughout our lives. When I'm single and I'm young and I'm invincible versus when I'm having a family versus when I'm, maybe dealing with a chronic condition as I get older, whatever those natural cycles are, they're going to be different for different people within your organization. And it's really critical, in my view, to think about healthcare access and benefits, not just health insurance, because those are two very different things and they're different lenses that are going to arrive at different solutions for your workforce. And so when you think about that balance, I guess the point I would try to drive home is that it really isn't a one size fits all. And I think we need to be careful about sort of pigeonholing ourselves into a benefit structure that treats it as such.
Agreed. I think your message there, or the takeaway I'm hearing, is that employees need to value their health insurance benefits that are being provided to them. They need to value it from a healthcare delivery perspective rather than a health insurance delivery. And so the brass tacks on that are employees shouldn't be reporting on whether they like their health insurance company or not like their health insurance company. It's more about how are those health benefits being delivered to them, and do they like them, and are they finding those valuable?
Right.
And on the, to expand, to bounce off of that, I think another part of the question that you asked, Cliff, about, what is the right balance, basically, right? There are two phenomena that have been driving the balance or the unbalance that we are in right now, which is over the last 20 years or so. We have seen a shift towards the large insurance providers, the large healthcare hospital systems, and so on and so forth, that have made, it's clear now, we know that has made the cost go up rather than down, right? So I'm not taking fight with anybody specifically, but it's clear that these oligopoly, right? It's no longer a free market, right? Is making costs go high. It's not utilization. We know that. The prices are going up, not the fact that patients are using or utilizing more healthcare services. That's true. I mean, Joel mentioned it. It's not going up. The utilization is not going up. Besides the pandemic, of course, which is a specific incident or uptick in the utilization. But besides that, it's not going up. So prices are the culprit, right? So we need to figure that out, and we need to be more creative. And the other, so creative being meaning, you have to ask a number of other people that are in that space and that are driving, putting a lot of effort to drive the cost down. And the other aspect of that conversation is the change in the generations, right? So the generational change is making things being valued differently by different people. We were talking earlier about time, right? So time as a value that has been it's been an oversight by companies, by U.S. companies, that has been actually being very valued on the European side of the pond, and not seen that much with much value on the U.S. side. And now the new generations, the last two, let's say, are valuing time much more than our parents did. And that has a value that we need to recognize, right? So maybe a piece of that compensation rebalancing act should go towards maybe not just dollars, but time or other types of benefits that have a value for specific groups of people.
I think you're also opening up a window in terms of when employers are looking at how to differentiate themselves when attracting and retaining employees. What are the tools in their toolbox that they can consider to differentiate themselves effectively? And so one of them that you're suggesting is time off. And there has been a lot of conversation in the past 10 years with regards to offering for certain industries and certain organizations an unlimited time off program rather than having a measured time off program. There again, an organization can differentiate themselves, and time is valuable in the sense that it's costing the company money. It's still compensation, but it's not really just specifically focusing on how much the employee is getting paid. There are a couple of other ways that organizations can differentiate themselves. Pascal, Joel, any ideas that come to mind on your end?
Yeah, I was thinking of that, sort of again in the context of health benefits, and it's, well, first of all, there's a generation that, and as a parent, I know this all too well, that, views the world through the handheld device that they carry around with them. I think it may be surgically implanted now into the fingertips of these teenagers. But I think there's, that's time. I mean, there's a generation that is, they want to access, a doctor in the way that they access all the other information that they ingest in the world. You know, they want it
Yep.
through their technology. They don't want to wait. They don't want to sit in an office. They don't want to drive somewhere. They want it right now when I need it, you know, in my hand. And it's delivering primary care in different ways where, there's been significant enhancements in the delivery of primary care through things like direct primary care, where I want to have access to a physician that's unlimited. I don't want to be, burdened with copays every time I talk to my doctor. I don't want to worry about all the, coding that goes on between my insurance company and my doctor that ultimately results in me getting a bill or not getting a bill if I ask the wrong question or the right question, however you might want to view it. It's, that's time, as well. And it's recognizing that people consume the world around them differently. And I think for those of us that are maybe a little bit older generation, sometimes it's really hard to understand, recognize, and sort of translate that into practical things like health benefits and, whatever other benefits or compensation that we're trying to think about.
I have another thought as we talk about differentiating ourselves as employers and how we can make our organization more attractive. There is also another shift that is going on financially. And when I talk about financially, I'm talking about a shift in the way financial transactions are occurring. With the advent of Venmo, with the advent of individuals being able to transfer money from one bank to another bank, that is a huge shift in the way money transfers today. We also can take a look at how money is transferred within an organization. There are so many different platforms that the employees receive that, and I'm going to put compensation in there in quotes, through so many different platforms in terms of just very simply, how do we get paid? How do we receive our employee benefits? How do we pay for our employee benefits through our contributions? If we have an HSA, how is money being sent to the HSA? If we have an FSA, the list just can go on and on and on. And I think this push to be able to have financial transactions occur at the time that you want them to occur, just like Joel is saying, having your access to a doctor at the time that you need access to a doctor is also another shift that employers could take a look at, because it's fractured, it's time consuming, it's requiring employers to have administrators in roles and positions that could effectively be done a little bit more streamlined and efficiently. And that whole financial transaction approach is also going to impact the way we think about how we deliver compensation. There's lots of different platforms out there. One that we're familiar with is a platform called Wallet. We use it at Circle Strategies in terms of how we deliver benefits to our employees, how we deliver rewards to our employees, recognition to our employees. And so it's a shift that I think we're going to all organizations are going to have to be paying attention to. Pascal, any thoughts from your side as to what are other ways employers can differentiate themselves in looking at performance, performance management?
Well, it's been out there for a long time already, but not quite everybody has understood or has embraced the various possibility that is offered to them. But one, bouncing off of just exactly what you said, and Joel's as well, is that not everybody is valuing money only. So we have to kind of get away a little bit, or stay away a little bit from, or and consider other options than just the bucket of money that we pay as an incentive for achieving goals and stuff. And particularly with, I was talking about generations, right? So some people are valuing different services, right? Time is one of them, right? So if you give time off instead of money, that has a value for a number of people. But also, in our busy lives, there are other important services that we would love to have better, cheaper, more accessible, such as, for example, new families, in need for daycare, right? If you bring the daycare, maybe not in the office, but close to the office with a service available to your employees, well, that has a huge value for these families. On the other side of that scale, you may have people my age that would have elderly people to care for, right? If you have some of those performance evaluation converted into a service that you can have access to or give access to your employees that would be in need for that. That is kind of some form of an exchange platform. That would be great, and that is existing in some companies. Zillow comes to mind because they have recently started an experience, an initiative in that area. And there are many other people that are actually transforming benefits money into points. So you can use points and exchange them for either a bucket of money or some other services. We have to be creative. That's kind of, I think, a great message for the day, right? We have to think outside the box.
Agreed. So we're coming to the end of our time. And so I think I can just wrap it up rather quickly to say that there are issues with compensation and benefits today. CEOs and managers and leaders of organizations should be paying attention to it, not necessarily short-sightedly by how much we're paying people to bring them into the organization, but also having a broader conversation with our board or our advisory folks for organizations that are not traded on the stock exchange. As to, we have to look at what this is going to do to our existing employees with regards to pay compression. Another area we should consider with our employee benefits to help solve this benefits problem is looking at value, looking at health benefits from a value perspective rather than a transaction perspective. And then what can we do to make this balance between compensation and benefits either balanced out or approached in a different way? We should be considering alternatives that we can differentiate ourselves as organizations to provide compensation and benefits to employees in a different way. That's not your traditional salary plus bonus or merit increase or things like that, because that is not working as well as it has been in the past. So as we wrap up, any last comments or suggestions that you folks, the experts, have to our audience as to what they should be considering when they look at this difficult answer to this complicated question?
I'll just add two closing thoughts to that. And I think that's a great summation, Cliff. I think one thing that I would point out is that companies are going to have to approach benefits compensation differently in the future than they have in the past. And anytime you say different, we're talking about change, and with change comes change management. And so I would be thinking about, from an organizational standpoint, that we have to be able to introduce change and successfully help our employees navigate change. So it's not just making a benefit change decision, it's getting our employees, acclimated to whatever that new environment might look like successfully. And I think, we all have our universe of people that we talk to and sort of, get advice from on these various decisions that we make as business owners. We're probably going to need to broaden that universe over the next, several years to get some different perspectives, to start learning more about some of the innovations that are out there, because we need to be careful to not sit in an echo chamber, ask the same people the same questions and get the same answers, so that we continue to do the same thing that isn't working effectively for us.
Exactly.
Well said. Well said, Joel.
Same in the same line. I would also add that final thoughts of mine about or message to the CFOs and CEOs that are listening is it's about time for employers to regain control over their benefits because they have actually that responsibility, right? Whether they like it or not. So it's about time, right? So get that future in your own hands, and there are people that can help you out there, as Joel said, and with creative ideas and new ways of tackling these problems. So regain control. It's a
Great.
lot of money. It's a lot of money out there.
It is. It is a huge amount of money. So thank you both. Thank you, Pascal. Thank you, Joel, for participating in our podcast today. I think we've been able to share some key takeaways that organizations can focus on as we look at 2023. Thank you all. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.